Welcome back to my channel Conquer the Fear. In this video, we are going to discuss top 5 techniques to handle not nulls in a better way. If you have been attending any interview or if you are here on this video to make your knowledge better, then this is the right video for you and you can handle this particular not null in a better way. The latest versions of Java being coming in. So without wasting the time, let's begin the video. Please watch this video till the end. Agenda wise, we are going to look into the following topic. We are going to discuss about how armature or professional null checks are being handled. What are the leverage, the utility classes which we use for simple checks. We can embrace the optional for complex chaining, which is Java 8 feature, and we are going to implement some defensive programming, which is called fail fast, which is using the object require not null. Now we can also make use of considering the null object pattern as well. And last, we will be making use of annotations and the static analysis. Now, if you are an amateur or if you are a professional, these are the way how we normally used to check or used to be do that. So there you used to write the multiple null checks, like if you used to have the if object and you have to check that, you can check that. So was supposed to be a problematic where it was not handled, it was not readable, it was not handled properly, and otherwise it was a redundant code which we have to write. Okay. Now this used to lead as an readable thing, which used to tell was tightly coupled as well. Now why it is considered bad? Because readably wise, if you see it has got nested statements which we create deeply, indeed it is going to be uh, a deeply independent code actually, right? So the formatting was supposed to be done like that. Now it was making hard to write the particular logic. It was quite difficult to maintain. Okay, so any changes in that particular object structure is going to add another layer. Like if you have country, right, you have to add address, right? So it require is to have multiple modifications of if conditions. Now, as I told, this was repetitive code. So you used to definitely write everywhere this not null condition. Now we'll look into the code, how it was written earlier. Now I have opened IntelliJ. In this I have created one program. Now if you see there is an address over here, there is a constructor, there are attributes over here, and then there is a user who is going to use this particular address. Okay. Now these are the class internally what the static class what we have written over here. Both are static. Now in the main like in the method, right, if you see I've created this particular instances over here. Now before going there, I wanted like to see this particular print method over here, but I will go to that. And now you see that I am creating this many instances over here. Now if you see here, there is a null address over here. There is no address assigned to it, and in some instance there is no even user created over here. Okay. Now this is the way how we used to handle the null handling examples earlier. So in this particular method, let's say I'm passing this, right? What happens is that user is there. Now here, if you see, this is the way we used to check this particular condition earlier. Now, if you notice, this is the first level check, this is the second level check, and then you see this is the third level check, and then if you see it is quite indented over here, and also there is lot of if and else written over here, right? There are a lot of things actually we need to check in the logic. This was how we used to be written. Now this was earlier when there was no better way to write it, but there are some better way to handle it right now, and we'll check those right now. We will be looking into leveraging the utility classes which we use for simple checks. Now there is a dedicated library for checking the null safe. It will be very precise, concise, and it is often very expensive. So there are three libraries, including the Java library. One is StringUtils, one is CollectionUtils, and one is ObjectUtils. Now for all three of them, we will be looking at source code example of each of them, how these particular libraries are being used up and can be used as an alternative for checking the nulls. Okay. Now this is one of the option, and this is not the, I would say, the final option. There are more options as we already discussed in the agenda. Now we are back on the IntelliJ IDE. Now we are going to look into the very first example, that is string null handling way. Now this is one of the library by Apache. Now if you open the pom.xml, now if you will be looking at this, you will see we have actually added the libraries over here. Okay, these are the libraries which are used for that. Okay? So once you have this particular thing, just try to Marvin download the source code and this one, so it will download that particular project. Now if you just highlight this particular jar, right, it will show you, like, it will be the jar string method. Now if you see, this is part of this particular common login line. Okay, now in this, if you see, we have a process method over here. Now this particular process method, if you look at this particular string, let's say we are processing some string over here. So the very first way is that we are going to check is using the string is empty or not, or was it the string util is empty or not. Now if you see here, this is going to the string.empty is going to require null check first. Okay, this will be checking the null first. Okay, now if you see here, this is going to be an example of not null, and then it is going to empty. Now if you see here, null pointer exception when it is null over here. Okay, this is the problem over here, and when you are using the fetch.empty as well. Now string is empty. Now is the string is empty or not, this is going to check that we have not empty as well. Okay, that's where we will be able to see. Okay, so we are going to run each of this particular thing and we'll let you know. Along with this, we have this particular string trim and is empty. Then again, string is blank or not. Now this empty trim is going to require null check first. Okay. So before this particular thing, right, to call this particular thing, already have to check if there is an we have to check for null before that. Okay. Then after we have collection null handling as well. Now if you see here, there is an import which we have already discussed. There is a collection, right? Now if you see, there is already a pom in the pom.xml where we already seen that we have already added this, right, the dependency. Now once you open this, now there is a list of this particular list of bananas or apple. There is an empty list, there is null, there is a, list and match of null, and then we are calling this. Okay, now if you see here, there is item is equal to null, right? It's going to be null item is equal to string. So this is how we should do that. Now, along with the collection util, how to null check checks, we have using the is empty, we have is not empty, particular items, having any value or not. We can also check, like, as we already discussed, collection is not empty, then we can do that. This is how we can normally do that. That particular. Now let's look at the optional way of handling complex chain. Now Java 8 features were introduced. One of the features, that is optional. Now it is part of util package and it is considered to be as a container object which either may contain or may not contain a non-null value. Okay, so that's how we are going to going to check and we get the use of this particular optional value as an util. Now, under this optional, we can make use of this particular basic way of handling the optional uses. We are going to look at the chain of operations with the optionals, like, we have map, let map, filters, and then we'll look at the what are the common pitfalls and best practices. Now let's look at the example of an optional. Now if you see in the main method, we will have this method optional class which we are using. Now in the main method, if you see here, there is an optional which is created as an off null, off value, and then we have an empty. Now based on this, there are if present method and get method, which we have to use it very cautiously. First it will check if the value is present in the then there is a condition written over here. Now this present can be on the empty as well as the value which will be present as. and then we will have it. Now there is another variation of null of particular earlier there is simply off. Now we have off null as well, which will be used up over here. Now we're creating an instance of this, and based on that again we will be actually checking the null along. Okay. Third is if present. Earlier it was if present. Now it is present, which will check if the value is present or not, and based on that the condition will check. Based on now we have an let's say you want some value that is not there, and the default value is written, right? So we have see or else over here can be one of the variations, and it will be very important and some default value if it is not present when you are expecting something. Then there is an or else other one in the get, which is going to record the default value from the supplier. This is going to give you a return value with some default message over here. Then comes or else throw. This is one of the where you will if there is an exception thrown an empty, right? So you check for it to throw an exception. That's why use of this your optional thing. Now let's look at the defensive programming that is going to be real fast. Now we have object requires not null feature. Now this is going to be a null value, which is going to be generally invalid, rather it is going to indicate some programmatic error, or we can have a invalid state as well. So in that case we can use the fail fast one. Now objects.require not null. This is one of the perfect way to use it. Now especially you have passing this particular thing as an parameters using the method or the constructor arguments. Now there are key methods where there are variations of object require non-null. Now there are three variations. One which is going to throw a null pointer exception if an object is null. Second variation is that it is going to run a null pointer exception with certain custom message if an object is null. Now third is that it's going to throw a null pointer exception with a custom message provided by the supplier. So it is going to be one of the lazy message generation, which is for the performance. Now, when to use this particular field path? When you have some mandatory method arguments, do you have some critical objects during the construction process, or where there is a null which is going to significantly break your contract, or let's say some having some invalid application state. So in that case, we use and when you want to prevent some null pointer exception when there is an unexpected thing in the calls. So in that case, make use of. Now let's jump into the code. Now if you look at this particular program, I've opened this, which is going to, let's we have a product over here, which is going to have a null parameters which are required for that. So it is a non-null thing which is going to be required. And under this, if you see, there is going to be a non-null, and then there is a further steps of creating this process. Now we'll go to this particular method and example. Now if you see here, this is switching in field first if an order is null or not. Now this is going to process it. It is going to check over here, and then there is a left of the logic which we have kept over here. Now if you see here, this is one of the value. Let's say we are passing some value, okay, and then we are creating a object over here. Let's say you are passing some invalid call, okay, and then you are printing it up. Now this is a we are passing null over here. So when we call this particular some null value, what will happen? It will actually check for the required not null, and then it will. ID will be there. It will be also the logic which will be created. Now we can process it. Then we have a uh, now when this particular thing will be called and then you're passing this particular null, then what will happen? This will throw a null pointer exception, and then it will call it. Okay. Then we are passing some a null value. Along with that, we have some earlier we have only passed one value over here. Now we are directly creating the object instance over here. We are passing some value to it, but the other one we are not passing it. It will throw an exception or null pointer exception. Similarly, I'm using some invalid argument, using some invalid parameters over here unexpected. then it will throw an illegal argument exception over here. This is how we actually will be able to see it. Then comes where the last option is making use of the supplier for the message. Now we have this particular message written over here. We have the check over here in log return null, and it is going to check the null value over here, and then it is going to return this particular message. This is the one message which is going to be returned over here, or else it will throw a null pointer exception. Okay. So let's run this particular example. Now if you see here, wherever we have actually successfully created in the first case, where we are passing the value. Later on, if you see, there are some exceptions which are caught up here and which were written in the catch block. Okay. So all wherever we have not passed a proper value or a proper things, actually there is an exception being thrown over here. Now we are checking on considering the null object pattern. Now this is one of the default behavior. Now, null object is one of the behavioral design pattern and it is going to give you a null safe replacement for null values either by creating the null object to provide a default value, either it does nothing or it is going to inherit behavior. So when do we use this? When you have an interface or an abstract class and it is going to null amplify that particular well-defined default behavior. So there is no operation, there is empty result, or when a client of your API would call, otherwise you have to frequently check for the null things. Now when not to use it, when when a null indicates an exceptional condition that requires that error to be thrown up. Let's say we are going to use of this very fast. Now what when the default behavior is truly going to inert or might be a problem, might mask a real problem for it. Okay? So in that case we must not use it. So if you look at this particular example, now this is object pattern over here. Now we have one implementation. We have one logger written over here. We have two methods over here. One is going to be a log method and then it is going to fetch. This is going to identify whether null object is needed for a specific logic or not. Now this is an interface. We'll have the implementation. One is the console logger, which is going to be implementation of that, and then we have a null log. Okay, so there will be two kind of things which will be making use of. One is console logger and one is the null logger. Okay, in that make a note we have this particular implementation of either false or true, and then ultimately we are making use of this static code in the client code. If you see here, there is no null check needed here, and there is also the null over. So here there is no null check required over here. Based on this particular logger, whatever we are passing here, call this particular perform action. Now we have a factory created over here, which is going to get the logger with some names. So if the logger is console or error, it is going to create an instance of this logger and it is going to read them. Okay, or else it is going to return the null logger. If there is something which is not apart from app logger or error log, it is going to create a different. Okay? Now in this particular thing, if you see, this is going to console is being called. It is going to successfully call that thing. Now in this actually it is going to call the null logger because it is passing the variable which is not part of the thing. So it is go to the other case. Now we'll see that particular thing. Okay, if you see there are some is null check over here. Okay, for this particular thing, and then it is going to call the null logger over here. Okay. Here also if it is checking the null logger and then it is going to null logger. Okay. Now we have another implementation similar to that. This might be an object that might be null. Similar implementation what is done over. Now if you see here, this is going to call this and the configuration. Now these are all things which are run here. So at the end we are going to look into the annotations and the static analysis. So we can make use of this @nullable, not null, which are provided by the libraries like Spring, JetBrains or JS, which are used as a meta information about nullable for parameters and value or other fields. Okay. So Spring is going to provide you null, nullable, not null. This can be commonly used and we can actually use it in the bean validation. So this is a string checker. So it is going to support some annotations over there. Here for this you have to have this particular dependency or the artifacts. The JetBrains we have this attribute nullable as well. We can annotate. We can add this particular dependencies in the form to XML, and we can do that. Checks. Now we'll look at this particular code as well. Now whatever the dependency what we spoke about, if you see here, these are all added here. The core, the annotation JetBrains and other JS are related things. Okay. Now this might not be the full example over here, but if you see this is the JetBrains. I made use of not null over here. These are all the parameters of things. Actually, this is the validation input. Now, if you see here, this is the method which is going to be annotated with not null. Now the caller must provide a null value. Okay, so the ID will want if there is passing a null value to this thing. So this is where you have to. How we can add this particular validations in validation. Similarly, if you see this method can return null value. Now if it is annotated with @nullable, so this is going to should handle the null case over here. So it will warn you if you don't check out your value before the null dereferencing. Now this method is nullable parameter. This is process matching. If you see not null, now this method will be nullable parameter. If you want to check. Now this idea will not warn the direct message here as it is declared as nullable. Okay, that's the reason. Now, but you still need to handle the null case over here inside once it is there. You can use it until it might fail or it might there is no try catch block. Okay. You can also have this particular things written at the field level that is I think is not null. Now, if you see here, okay, we can have this particular things implemented. You can have the nullable also. Now here also, if you see these are all not null we have added. Okay, similarly like this, we can actually check this. Hmm? Have this run. Now let's run this and see. If you see here, which are successfully run, oh, you're going to check that and then it is going to run. Okay, or you going to throw some value here. I hope these examples are very clear to you. If this video was helpful, please share it with the needy people. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Thank you. Thank you for watching.